since it happened on Monday night. Did SPD use excessive force in their use of pepper spray and tear gas on Capitol Hill?
I met with the Office of Professional Accountability and the Office of Inspector General to have them do a review of that specific question formally. Office of Police Accountability will look at any acts of individual officers. The Office of Inspector General looks systemically to make sure that the policies and procedures we have, that were all court approved, by the way, with the use of crowd management tools, were done in accordance with policy, but more importantly, do those policies need to change?
I did get the sense, though, from what you and the chief had to say yesterday, that there were concerns about what exactly everybody is now seeing on video.
There's absolutely concerns with everyone, and that's why I want to make sure that the systems we have in place look at it. They're independent investigations, and the community needs to have confidence that it's done transparently, thoroughly, and comes back with what the facts are. And so I think that's why yesterday morning, after the events of the night before, I met in person with Andrew Meyerberg of the Office of Police Accountability and Lisa Judge, the head of the Office of Inspector General.
But are you aware at this point whether officers gave any sort of warning to disperse before they launched the tear gas and the grenades?
I do not know whether they gave a dispersal order or not. I do know that that one of the things that I've asked them to look at is the policy requires there to be verbal notice, and except for under limited exigent circumstances. And so one of the things we want to look at is the policy specific enough to make sure that crowds understand what the rules are and police follow the rules as well.
But as you know, there's a lot of talk about speeches and policies and procedures, but people want to see change now. You've heard it directly. You heard it yesterday outside the Emergency Operations Center. People want to see changes overnight. What are people going to see tomorrow that's different than what they may see right now in terms of policing today?
So systemic change never happens overnight. And I think more importantly, and when I talk to the young people and when I've talked to leaders from the African American community and leaders from the CPC, we have to have a community-centered dialogue and discussion to get systemic changes. They don't need me or the chief of police just to determine what changes are going to happen immediately. Now, there's some things that will change because we've heard widely from the community that those things had particular importance to the community. For example, there was a wide belief that the officers were purposely covering up their badge numbers when they were wearing their mourning badges. I don't believe that was the case because the policy requires every officer to have their name on the outside of their uniform. And even the pictures that people showed where the mourning badge that people wear to mourn an officer or fallen shows their name. But it's important and we should change it. So we will change that so that officers can still wear a mourning badge, but we have to devise a system to make sure when they do, the badge number is visible for the community to know and see. Similarly, there was a lot of confusion about why body-worn video cameras were not turned on during much of the protests and demonstrations. That was a policy and a law put in place under the prior administration based on legitimate civil rights concerns that the ACLU and others had about people exercising their free speech being surveyed and videoed by police authorities. I think it's time to revisit that, and I'm asking the City Council to engage the Community Police Commission, the ACLU, and others to see whether that policy should be modified in any way so that, and if it isn't, the community has a voice in that so they have more confidence in why the policy exists. So I think there's some things we can change immediately, but systemic changes, I think, don't happen overnight, and I think they need very thoughtful dialogue with community, looking at best practices and how things can change. getting what the impacts will be on effective policing itself. Because I do know that while everybody has deep, deep concerns about things they see in policing in Seattle and across this country, I also know that when people dial 911, they want the police to respond, and they want them to respond justly, fairly, and effectively. And so we want to make sure that we can do that as well.
I saw that Chief Best during the CPC meeting that I know you were just in as well said there were a couple of incidents already debunked. Do you know more about that?
The only one that I am aware of is there was apparently I didn't see it myself, but a broad internet uh, about an officer that they believed had used pepper spray or mace on a child, and there was many thousands of tweets about it and many thousands of complaints to OPA about that particular officer. They were able to get the video and determined that that officer actually was not involved in that incident at all, and they're trying to get the video to determine exactly what happened. But it was widely believed that this officer, who they named by name, was guilty of doing this act. And Andrew Meyerberg was able to act very quickly and put out a public statement to show that despite the widespread belief in that, it actually was not true.
So wait, I just want to parse that out. You're saying that the officer that was named as being involved in that incident is not true, but
Correct.
the incident itself happened.
I don't know the answer to what happened in the incident. I've only seen one small video clip, and obviously it's an independent investigation, and Mr. Meyerberg would not and should not be disclosing to the public or others, including me, where they are and what's happening. But I do believe that he made a very quick determination that the officer who was publicly and widely named was not in the area or involved in that at all. I don't know what the underlying facts will be that he determines.
Okay, a couple of other questions just based on time. I still have to ask the curfew question. I talked to Councilmember Lisa Herbold yesterday, and she says, what's the tactical benefit of doing anything like that? Why have a curfew now every night through Saturday morning?
You know, I rely on Chief Best's recommendation on that, and her judgment based on the input from her police officers and commanders on the tools they need to try to ensure that there can be peaceful marches, but that if things turn violent or if there are people who are not peaceful in nature, that they have the tools they need to ensure public safety. And she continues to believe it's an important tool. As early as this morning, her commanders agreed that it's something they need to be able to have, for example, to advise people that when it's time to disperse, that's an additional reason why they need to disperse. And so I think what's lost on people is that the fact that the police have not arrested people for violating the curfew and allow people to continue to demonstrate shows that the city is trying to weigh the very important constitutional right for people to protest and raise their voices on what happened, not just in Minneapolis, but over generations of systemic racism on every institution in this country. And that is a critical and important right. And if people are protesting peacefully, they use the judgment that outweighs the need to enforce the curfew.